Reigns of Change. The tiger's words tore at Mowgli's head. How many lives is a man cub worth? What had he meant by that? Mowgli turned the thread over in his head and his heart as the rains returned. When he was growing up, the clouds breaking and pouring their waters back into the earth was a reason to celebrate. But now that Shere Khan had left the mark of his words on the jungle, everything had become quiet and dark, and even the birds seemed to lose their voices. The wolves argued for many days at Council Rock, faces low and full of frowns, with Bagheera, the observer and advisor, nearby in an adjacent tree. Gray and Mowgli watched from afar, catching pieces of the adult arguments and the occasional angry growl. Mowgli could hear Raksha over the rest. "What are they talking about?" asked Gray. Mowgli just stared. Simple questions didn't seem to have simple answers anymore. The tiger wanted him dead, but why? Surely there was other food in the jungle for a cat that big. If not, then Mowgli knew the pack was the only thing that stood between him and Shere Khan's belly. As the council argued, some shared their love for Mowgli, while other, older wolves expressed a worry that they would be risking war with the fearsome tiger by protecting the man-cub. He knew he was not of the wolf pack, not really, but he had spent his entire life hoping to become one of them, and now they debated his worth, the value of his life, without ever acknowledging his place among them. Mowgli felt like he was a burden to the pack, and maybe that was all he had ever been. As the council spoke, Mowgli couldn't hear all the words, but what he did catch tied knots in his belly and pulled at his heart. They barked and growled for days until one cold night Mowgli had heard enough. Sick with questions that he couldn't ask, Mowgli saw Raksha making a final appeal to the council. He knew what he had to do. "He cares for the cubs," pleaded Raksha. "He pulls thorns from our paws. He is part of the pack. The strength of the wolf is the pack." His Amaz speaking the oath caused the other wolves to grunt and bare their teeth. Mowgli moved closer to their gathering, quiet and unseen. "Even the strength of the pack is no match for the tiger," barked the wolf lieutenant, his face scarred by old wars. The man-cub looked to Raksha, who shook her shoulders and raised her ears. She didn't back down. Mowgli had never seen her so upset. "We raised him as one of our own. Why should that change now?" "Because Shere Khan will kill him," countered the lieutenant, "and kill all who try to protect him." "Enough," Akela spoke, silencing them both. "This is my decision." Everyone turned to Akela, whose voice was serious, but not mean. Mowgli saw warmth in his old eyes. "We always knew that someday he would have to leave us, but we are the only family he has ever known. If he stays, we must be prepared to give our lives." Mowgli's heart tore at the inside of his chest. He knew he had to say something. This was his story, not theirs. Akela moved to speak again, but Mowgli rose from his hiding spot and stood. He planted his feet firmly and spoke for himself, his voice shaking under the weight of his words. "Then I'll leave!" exclaimed Mowgli. The man-cub strode into the middle of the council. The circle of wolves parted, surprised. Bagheera sat up on his haunches on the tree branch. "Mowgli, go back to the den," said Raksha. Her tone was tense, sharp. Mowgli summoned every ounce of courage he could and defied her. He needed to be heard. His hands shook as he spoke, so he closed them into fists at his side. "That fixes it, right? I can hide in the jungle and the tiger won't bother you anymore." Akela looked into Mowgli's eyes, firm. "This is not for you to decide." Mowgli stood his ground, staring right back at Akela, determined. The warmth in the old wolf's eyes was gone, replaced with a flicker of something else, but Mowgli didn't care. This was no trick, no plaything they were debating. This was Mowgli's life, and he would have a say, even if it meant disobeying the only family that he had ever known. He would not let them put their lives in jeopardy because of him. Then Bagheera dropped down and entered the circle. "Akela," said the panther, "perhaps I can be of help." The other wolves turned, taken aback by this interruption. Mowgli wasn't sure what the old cat would do or say, but his next words almost knocked the man-cub over. "The boy is right," continued Bagheera. "Maybe it is time he found another place." Bagheera was actually agreeing with him. "No," said Raksha. She stared past Bagheera, catching Akela's gaze. Bagheera continued, "I am the one who brought him here, and I am the one to return him to where he belongs." This wasn't exactly what Mowgli had intended, not really, but before he could say anything, Raksha turned on Bagheera, her ears back, ferocity in her words. "I will not let you. He is my cub." Akela looked at Mowgli, the warmth back in his eyes. "It is the only place he'll be safe," Akela said. Then he turned to Bagheera. "You have my decision, old cat." Raksha gritted her teeth and closed her eyes. Mowgli looked to his mother wolf. "It's okay, Ami," Mowgli said, his voice soft. "I won't go far. I'll come back and visit." Raksha walked up to her old man-cub and placed her head against his. Mowgli was overcome with emotion and memories. The familiar smell of her coat put pictures in his head, behind his eyes. Mowgli, small, very small, grabbing at Raksha, pulling her snout as she licked his face, cleaning him, sleeping on her warm fur, feeding and listening to the low hum of her wolf song. Running with her, learning to forage. All those past seasons were a jumble in Mowgli's head and mind, and they caught in his throat. The only constant in his life were those wolves, his family, and he was choosing to leave them. It felt so wrong, but Mowgli knew he couldn't stay. Staying meant putting his family, his pack, in danger. He had to go. "Never forget this, Raksha. You are mine. Mine to me, no matter where you go or what they may call you. You will always be my Mowgli." Her words broke something in Mowgli, and his eyes ran wet with water like a warm rain. The man-cub looked up at Akela and saw that flicker in his eyes once more. But now Mowgli realized it was something good. Was it respect? Was it pride? A combination? Mowgli's vision blurred, and overwhelmed, he turned his back on the wolf. Bagheera led Mowgli away, and the pack watched the man-cub leave for the last time. Gray called after Mowgli, barking, howling for his brother, but Mowgli didn't answer. He couldn't. Gray howled until exhaustion stole his voice from him. As one, Raksha, Akela, and the others took up the call, some of them howling until the dawn came, howling for their man-cub.